Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are looking at, is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon infinite combat today, which is a very long title for an anime licensed tie-in JRPG visual novel combination. I haven't got a review of this up on Digitally Downloaded just yet. I only got the game earlier this week, so I have been playing through it. What I decided to do instead was a first impressions video. This is the first maybe 3 or 4 hours worth of play. But what I can say up front is that unless the experience sours quite significantly in the later parts of the game, I am going to give this a good review. I am enjoying it a great deal. I don't think that this is a particularly memorable game, and to compare to another licensed tie-in that I've just played, Fairy Tail, I think that this one is a level below Fairy Tail. I think Fairy Tail was a standout example of how to do an anime licensed tie-in. I think that this one is a highly enjoyable game. It would certainly appeal to existing fans of the property. It will give people who are fans of roguelike JRPGs something to enjoy as well. But it is definitely at a slightly lower budget and ambition level than Fairy Tail. But to talk about the actual game, I have never actually experienced is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon. I don't know what the anime is. I know nothing about whether there's even a manga. I assume there is because that's how these things usually work. But I don't know anything about this property. That in itself is not a problem. I didn't know anything about Fairy Tail either going into it and ended up loving it and actually wanting to check out Fairy Tail. I have come away so far from my impressions with this with a similar feeling. I probably would like to see what this anime is like because I think I would enjoy it. It's got a combination of humor, fan service, fantasy, kind of action, a good range of characters, and quite a few of those characters I would imagine that I'd quite enjoy as well. And it's a fairly traditional fantasy anime. I don't think that it's going to break ground or be subversive in any way, but in terms of delivering something that is comforting and kind of expected for fans of the genre, I think that this will deliver. So I am interested in checking out the anime, but I walked into this game not knowing anything. And really, if you think about it, in terms of licensed properties, I'm the kind of audience that developers should want to reach with these kinds of games, because they should be a way of introducing people who maybe are not familiar with the anime to the anime and encouraging some kind of cross-pollination, as happened with Fairy Tail for a lot of people. Ideally, if a game is a really good licensed title, it actually encourages you to get involved with the whole franchise. Now, this one has a combat system which is a little bit disappointing in the sense that when I saw the screenshots, I thought it was a turn-based mystery dungeon thing, like Chocobo Dungeon or Mystery Dungeon itself, or any of the other kind of dungeon crawlers that we've seen Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. There's a lot of them. If you look at the presentation of the combat system with the top-down isometric perspective and the randomly generated dungeons, it looks like it would be a turn-based thing. But when I started to play, I discovered obviously that it is an action combat system instead. So initially that was a little bit disappointing. I love my turn-based roguelikes and I was looking forward to this one being one of those. But when I got into the combat system, I quite enjoyed it for what it was as well. It's very simple. There are no major combos that you need to learn. There's some special attacks that you can get, and obviously you can level your character up, buy new equipment for them, and go through all of that JRPG process. But the moment-to-moment action is pretty much wandering right into the middle of a horde of enemies, wailing away with your sword, and then ducking out of the way again. But what I like about it is the way that it encourages spatial use of the dungeon, because the enemies tend to have quite a lot of hit points, and you're not going to get through most of them with a single combo attack, meaning that in the time after the combo, when your character needs to recover, the enemies can potentially make a counter-attack. What you can do to try to get out of the way is duck and dive and whatnot, and so you need to make sure that you don't get your character caught up against walls or stuck in a corner. You need to really push out and use the space quite well, which is tactically, it's quite an interesting thing. At the moment, I've only fought a couple of different enemy types. The AI is not particularly great, of course, but when the enemies come in larger hordes, I definitely feel there's a pressure to be quite mobile and move around the space really effectively, which I enjoyed, and I do think that there's plenty of room for that to continue to grow and become engaging, especially as the game becomes more difficult and you need to be even more effective with how you use space. The second part of the game is, of course, the visual novel stuff. And this game has a nice balance between the combat and JRPG stuff and the visual novel stuff. It's not like, for example, Utawara Ramono, where you would have an hour worth of visual novel, because it is mostly a visual novel before you'd get to a combat scene to break things up. This one is more kind of 50-50, I guess, in approach, and cutscenes are generally fairly short. And those cutscenes are quite enjoyable. You do get a good sense of the characters. I do feel like there is some assumed knowledge about the anime property itself, and the developers have kind of assumed to an extent that you know roughly what these characters are and their situation and the overall kind of world lore and stuff, which I don't have. So I do feel like there are some gaps that mean that another person who is familiar with the anime will probably connect with it immediately a little bit faster. But with that being said, I am able to follow along with the general plot. I am starting to get a sense of the characters and their situation, and it is really quite enjoyable. The art style is quite simple for these visual novel things. It's really, as you can see right here on the screen right now, the character portraits are quite static. They move their mouths a little bit and blink, but it doesn't have the kind of slick animation of some of the more highly produced visual novels out there, even the likes of Utawara Ramono, which I mentioned. There's a greater depth, I guess, of animation in the way that the characters look, and to think of probably my favourite visual novel, at least in the fan service space, Data Live, the characters are all kind of bobbing their heads in a very kind of smooth way, and it's a very attractive animation effect. This game is much more static than that in the narrative sections, but for people who have played a lot of visual novels, that won't be distracting. What is important is that the character models are quite nice, as you can see they are, and that there are some occasional key art scenes that pop up that are really effective, and that's where this game gets a chance to show its more fan servicey moments. You'll see one of those right at the end of this video. Now, in terms of the fan service, I actually thought there'd be more of it just on the nature, on the name of the game. When you call the anime property "Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon?", you certainly imagine that it would be quite fan servicey, and there is a little bit of that, but it comes across as fairly restrained. And I think that people who are generally who don't have a problem with fan service but find that some games go a little bit too far, I think that this game will not upset them in any way. I think that it's one of those ones that has the light touch, charming fan service, which is really there to enhance the humour and kind of charm of the narrative and characters, but it's not designed to be titillating. It's not trying to be overly sexy. It's more playful and, if anything, a little bit kind of self-aware in its humour. So this game does have plenty of humour. The characters in the combat are not particularly ludicrous, but in the situations are quite funny, and again, those key art scenes are quite amusing. So that's basically my initial impressions of Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon. Like I said, this is only the first couple of hours. As you would have seen, I guess, a bit of the interesting character designs, some of them are amusing. One thing I want to quickly mention, in the first couple of hours, the game jumps between a couple of different protagonists and situations. I haven't had a chance to explore whether that goes further than that, or it was just kind of an introductory thing. But yeah, there is a bit of jumping going on, which does, again, contribute to the feeling that, as somebody who hasn't seen the anime, I'm a little bit left out on some of the plot points, but it does... it's still quite followable. It's quite easy to follow. So anyway, that's enough for this video. Stay tuned for my review early next week. Thanks as always for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos, because I want to keep expanding what I'm doing here, and please do consider backing me on Patreon. Even $1 a month is a huge help. Thank you very much as always. This is the end of the week, so have a great weekend. Play lots of games, have lots of fun. This is available now if you want to try this one out as well. And we will see you next week.